I'm Sherry, 65 years old, a retired nurse who's been feeling rather lonely since my husband passed away 3 years ago. I decided to visit our beach house for a change of scenery, hoping the ocean air would lift my spirits. When I pulled into the driveway, I was surprised to see my daughter-in-law's car, along with several unfamiliar vehicles parked outside. Something didn't feel right. Nobody had mentioned they'd be using the house. If you're watching this, I'd love to know where you're from. Please hit that like button and subscribe before I tell you what happened next. My son Andrew is 42 now, a software engineer with a prestigious tech company in the city. We've always been incredibly close, especially after his father died when Andrew was just 16. I practically raised him on my own, working double shifts at Memorial Hospital to make sure he could pursue his education. Those years were tough, but seeing him graduate from college made every sacrifice worthwhile. 5 years ago, Andrew married Julia, a 38-year-old interior designer with a sleek portfolio and charming smile. During their courtship and early in the marriage, Julia was sweet as pie to me, calling me Mom and bringing thoughtful gifts whenever they visited. The wedding was beautiful, and I genuinely believed my son had found someone who would value family as much as we did. But small changes in Julia's attitude began surfacing about 6 months after the wedding. She would make subtle remarks about my home decor being outdated, or question why Andrew and I spoke on the phone so often. Our Sunday dinners became less frequent, with Julia always having some reason why they couldn't make it: a client emergency, social obligations with her friends, or simply being too exhausted to drive the 20 minutes to my home. I started feeling increasingly isolated from my son's life. When I'd suggest meeting for lunch while Andrew was at work, Julia would say they were on a strict budget, though she never seemed to hesitate spending on designer clothes or expensive furniture for their apartment. I noticed Andrew calling me less, and when we did speak, Julia was often hovering nearby, monitoring our conversations. There were small disagreements between Julia and me, nothing major but enough to create tension. She once criticized the birthday gift I bought for Andrew, saying it showed I didn't really know what he liked anymore. Another time she reorganized my kitchen while visiting, claiming she was helping, but making me feel incompetent in my own home. Still, I always chose peace over confrontation, swallowing my hurt feelings for Andrew's sake. The beach house has always been my sanctuary. My husband Tom purchased it 30 years ago, when property along the coast was still somewhat affordable. It's a modest 3-bedroom cottage with weathered blue shingles and a sprawling deck that faces the ocean. Andrew spent every summer of his childhood there, learning to swim in the waves and building sandcastles that grew more elaborate as he aged. After Tom died, I couldn't bear to sell the property. It held too many precious memories: the faded marks on the kitchen wall, tracking Andrew's height through the years; the small garden Tom had lovingly tended; the fireplace where we'd played board games during summer storms. This house represented everything that mattered to me: family love and the beautiful life Tom and I had built together. I maintained ownership of the beach house in my name, though I'd always made it clear that Andrew was welcome to use it whenever he wanted. All I asked was that he let me know ahead of time so I could ensure the place was stocked and ready. Until that day, he had always respected this simple request. The 4-hour drive to the beach house had left me exhausted, but excited. I hadn't visited in months and was looking forward to 2 weeks of peaceful walks along the shore, reading on the deck, and reconnecting with the local community. The sight of multiple cars in my driveway was jarring, but I initially thought perhaps Andrew had planned a surprise visit to cheer me up. I parked behind a red SUV I didn't recognize and grabbed my suitcase from the trunk. The sound of laughter and music drifted from inside the house. As I approached the front door, I noticed unfamiliar shoes scattered across the welcome mat my husband had personalized with our family name. Using my key, I stepped inside and froze at the threshold. The living room had been completely rearranged, my comfortable old sofa pushed against a wall to make room for 2 inflatable mattresses. The coffee table Tom had crafted by hand was buried beneath pizza boxes, beer bottles, and makeup bags. 8 people I'd never met lounged around the room, some watching TV, others scrolling through phones. In the kitchen, I spotted Julia directing 2 women as they prepared food. She was wearing my apron, the one with "World's Best Grandma" printed across the front, a hopeful gift I'd bought myself years ago, still waiting for Andrew and Julia to start a family. "Excuse me," I said, my voice barely audible above the noise. A young man wearing swimming trunks noticed me first. "Hey, someone's here," he called out, turning down the television. Julia looked up from the kitchen counter, her smile faltering when she saw me standing in the doorway with my suitcase. "Sherry," she said, not making a move toward me. "What a surprise." "I'd say the same," I replied, setting down my bag. "I didn't realize anyone would be here. I came for my usual spring visit." The room had fallen uncomfortably silent. Julia wiped her hands on my apron and reluctantly approached. "We decided last minute to use the beach house. The weather forecast looked perfect, so I thought, why not?" I glanced around at the strangers who were now staring at me. "And who are all these people?" "Oh, just family," Julia said dismissively. "My sister Amanda and her husband Keith, my cousins Taylor and Zach, my college roommate Heather and her boyfriend, and my parents are out getting more groceries. They'll be back soon." My mind was spinning. Not only had Julia brought guests to my house without permission, but she'd invited her entire family and friends. Meanwhile, I noticed my decorative pillows had been shoved into a corner, my favorite reading chair now held someone's open suitcase, and the family photos that normally lined the mantel had been replaced with bottles of liquor. "Where's Andrew?" I asked, looking around for my son. Julia's expression tightened slightly. "Business trip, last-minute thing to Tokyo. He'll be gone about 10 days. He didn't mention anything when we spoke last week," I said, confusion mounting. "Like I said, it was very last minute," Julia replied with an edge to her voice. "Look, Sherry, we're kind of in the middle of planning a beach day tomorrow. We didn't expect company." Company? The word stung. This was my house, yet somehow I was being treated as an unwelcome visitor. I noticed one of Julia's cousins smirking at a friend, and I felt my face grow hot with embarrassment. "I'm not company, Julia," I said quietly. "This is my house." Julia's eyes narrowed slightly. "Well, it's the family beach house, and we're family too. Anyway, we've already settled in for the week." I stood there, my travel weariness suddenly compounded by this unexpected confrontation. The house I had been dreaming of returning to was now filled with strangers who clearly saw me as an intrusion. I took a deep breath, determined to handle the situation with grace. "Julia, I planned this trip weeks ago. I always come to the beach house this time of year." Julia shrugged, turning back to her food preparation. "You never mentioned it to us. Besides, it doesn't make sense for such a big house to sit empty when the whole family could enjoy it." Her sister Amanda chimed in. "We've been having such a great time. The neighbors even said they were happy to see the house being used instead of just sitting there." My neighbors, people I'd known for years, apparently discussing my property as though it had been abandoned rather than respectfully maintained. The thought made my stomach tighten. "I need to put my things away," I said, picking up my suitcase. "I'll be using the master bedroom, of course." Julia exchanged glances with her mother, who had just returned with grocery bags. "Actually, my parents are in there," she said. "All the rooms are taken, but there's the pull-out couch in the sunroom." The sunroom had no curtains, no privacy, and was directly off the kitchen where people would be passing through at all hours. I had been relegated to the worst sleeping arrangement in my own home. "Julia, that's my bedroom," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "It has my personal things in it." "We moved them," she said casually. "Everything's in the hall closet. We needed the dresser space." I walked to the closet and found my clothes' toiletries, and even my husband's photograph that normally sat on the nightstand, all haphazardly piled on shelves. It felt like a violation, seeing my intimate belongings treated with such disregard. I needed to speak with Andrew. This situation was unacceptable. I pulled out my phone, but Julia quickly intercepted. "I wouldn't call him right now," she said. "The time difference, you know, plus he's in meetings all day. He specifically said he didn't want to be disturbed unless it was an emergency." I put my phone away, not wanting to cause problems for my son at work, but feeling increasingly isolated. Throughout the evening, I observed how Julia's family had completely taken over. They used my kitchen without cleaning up, lounged in my husband's recliner with shoes on, and spoke loudly late into the night with no consideration that I might be trying to sleep. I overheard fragments of conversations about me that made my heart sink. "That's the mother-in-law. Can you believe she just showed up? Julia says she's always inserting herself into their lives. Probably lonely and has nothing better to do." When I went to the kitchen for a glass of water, I discovered they had consumed the special cookies I had brought for my stay, a local delicacy I looked forward to each visit. My reading glasses had been moved from the side table where I always kept them, and someone had reprogrammed all the preset stations on the radio away from my preferred classical music. That first night on the lumpy pull-out couch listening to strangers laugh and talk in my home, I felt tears sliding down my face in the darkness. I had never felt so unwelcome and disrespected in a place that had always been my safe haven. The next morning I woke up with resolve strengthening my spine. After a restless night on the uncomfortable pull-out couch, I was determined to have a frank conversation with Julia about boundaries and respect. I found her in the kitchen, directing food preparations for what appeared to be an enormous barbecue. Coolers were being packed with drinks, platters of raw meat sat ready for grilling, and bags of charcoal were stacked by the door. "Good morning," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Julia, we need to talk about this arrangement." She barely looked up from slicing tomatoes. "Can it wait? We're having 30 people over for a beach barbecue today. Friends from college are driving down and we need to secure a good spot before noon." 30 people, I echoed, stunned by the scale of the gathering. "Just a small get-together," her mother chimed in with a dismissive wave. "Julia always knows how to throw the best parties." I took a steadying breath. "Before you continue with your plans, I'd like to find some of my personal items. I can't locate my photo albums that were in the bookcase." "Oh, those old things," Julia's father said. "We needed space for the drinks cooler, so we put them in the garage." Alarmed, I hurried to the garage, which was known to leak during heavy rain. There, stuffed carelessly in a cardboard box, were my precious family albums, including irreplaceable photos of Tom and baby Andrew, along with the handcrafted wooden box containing Tom's wedding ring love letters and the watch I'd given him on our 20th anniversary. I carried the box back inside, unable to hide my distress. "These are priceless mementos of my late husband," I said, my voice shaking. "They should never have been moved to the garage where they could be damaged." Julia looked up from her food prep irritation, clear on her face. "We needed the space, Sherry. It's not like you were using them." "That's not the point," I insisted. "These are my personal belongings in my house. You had no right to touch them without asking." The kitchen had grown quiet, Julia's family watching our exchange with thinly veiled interest. "Your house," Julia's voice rose. "Andrew is entitled to use this house too. It's as much his as it is yours." "I've never prevented Andrew from using the house," I replied. "All I've asked is that you let me know in advance, which you clearly didn't do this time. And these people aren't Andrew. They're your extended family and friends using my property without permission." Julia slammed down the knife she was holding. Her face flushed with anger as she stepped toward me. "We don't have space here, you old parasite, leave," she shouted, her voice ringing through the kitchen. "You're always hovering, always wanting to be included, always expecting Andrew to check in with Mommy. Do you have any idea how pathetic that is? You're just a clingy old woman who can't accept that her son has a life that doesn't revolve around her." I stood frozen, the box of memories clutched to my chest as Julia continued her tirade. "We were having a perfect vacation until you showed up unannounced. No one wants you here. You're just an old parasite with nothing better to do than interfere in our lives." The words struck like physical blows. Parasite, old, unwanted. Each one pierced deeper than the last. In my 65 years, I had never been spoken to with such cruelty, such naked contempt. Julia's friend Heather snickered from the doorway. "Maybe you should book a hotel, Grandma. The adults want to have some fun." Julia's mother stood with arms crossed, a satisfied smirk on her face. "Honestly, Sherry, don't you have any friends your own age to bother? This vacation was planned for family." I felt dizzy with humiliation as every person in the kitchen, strangers in my home, stared at me with judgment or amusement. The beach house that had been my sanctuary, the place where Tom and I had built so many happy memories, had become the site of my greatest humiliation. With trembling hands, I placed the memory box on the counter and went to gather my essential belongings. Tears blurred my vision as I collected my medication, a change of clothes, and my purse. As I headed for the door, Julia called after me. "Don't forget to lock up when you leave, and don't bother calling Andrew. He agrees we deserve some private family time." The laughter that followed me out the door was the final indignity. I climbed into my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely insert the key. As I drove away from my beloved beach house, now overrun with people who despised me, I had never felt so utterly alone. I checked into a small motel 2 miles down the coast, a dingy place I would never normally consider staying. Sitting on the edge of the sagging bed, I debated calling Andrew. What if Julia was right, and he had approved this takeover? The thought that my own son might have agreed to exclude me was too painful to contemplate. After a sleepless night in the motel, I knew I needed answers. Something about the situation didn't add up. Andrew and I had always been close, and despite Julia's increasing influence, I couldn't believe he would deliberately hurt me this way. I called Patrick, Andrew's friend since college, and now his colleague at the tech firm. Patrick had always been like a second son to me, often joining us for holidays when his own family, who lived across the country, couldn't fly him home. "Mrs. Carter," Patrick answered warmly. "Great to hear from you. How's the beach?" "Not quite as I expected," I replied carefully. "Patrick, is Andrew really in Tokyo right now?" A pause. "Tokyo." "No, he's been here all week. He's actually been having a rough time since the layoffs." My heart sank. "Layoffs? What layoffs?" Patrick's voice dropped. "Oh no, you didn't know the company downsized last month. Andrew was among those let go. He's been interviewing like crazy, but nothing's panned out yet." The revelation stunned me. Andrew had lost his job and hadn't told me. More concerning, Julia had lied about his whereabouts. "Has he seemed okay otherwise?" I asked. Patrick hesitated. "Between us, not really. He's stressed about money. Said something about Julia insisting they maintain their lifestyle despite the income change. I offered to loan him some cash, but he refused." I thanked Patrick and ended the call, pieces of the puzzle starting to fall into place. I next contacted my bank, where I confirmed that the beach house remained solely in my name. Tom had been explicit in his will. The property would pass to Andrew only after my death. With growing determination, I reached out to Diane, a real estate agent friend who lived near the beach house. "Sherry," she greeted me, "I was just thinking about you. A woman was asking questions about your property yesterday, market value, selling process, that sort of thing." "Did this woman give her name?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Julia Carter. Said she was exploring options for her mother-in-law who might be downsizing. I mentioned I knew you personally and hadn't heard about selling plans, but she insisted it was all very preliminary." My suspicions confirmed. I made 2 more calls. First to a lawyer who specialized in property rights and elder protection. Then, most importantly, to Andrew at our old home number. Julia answered. "Carter residence." "Julia, it's Sherry. I need to speak with Andrew." "He's busy job hunting," she replied curtly. "I'll tell him you called." "I know he lost his job, Julia," I said firmly, "and I know he's not in Tokyo. Please put my son on the phone." After a long silence, Andrew's voice came through. "Mom, where are you? Julia said you were visiting friends in Florida." "I'm in a motel near our beach house," I replied. "The beach house where Julia and her entire family are currently staying." "What? That's not possible. Julia told me you offered them the beach house because we needed to save money on vacation this year." We arranged to meet the following morning at a cafe in town, away from Julia's watchful eyes. When I saw my son walk through the door, the strain of recent weeks was evident on his face. He looked older, tired, the confident set of his shoulders diminished. He embraced me tightly. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Julia had lied to both of us. She told me she'd spoken with you, and you were happy to let us use the beach house while you visited old nursing friends." Over coffee, I gently shared everything: Julia's cruel words, how her family had displaced me from my own home, the discovery that Julia was exploring selling the property, and the evidence of financial struggles he'd been hiding. Andrew's expression moved from shock to shame to anger. "I've been trying to protect you from worrying about my job situation," he admitted, "but Julia's been pressuring me to maintain appearances, keep up with her friends' lifestyles. The credit cards are maxed out. She convinced me the beach house was sitting empty anyway." "Why would you think I wouldn't want to help you during a difficult time?" I asked, reaching for his hand. His eyes filled with tears. I was embarrassed. I've always wanted you to be proud of me, and I felt like I'd failed." I squeezed his hand. "Nothing could make me stop being proud of you, Andrew. Nothing. But we need to address what's happening at the beach house. I won't be driven away from my own property by anyone, not even your wife's family." Andrew straightened his shoulders, a flash of his father's determination crossing his face. "Let's go there now. Together." We arrived at the beach house just as Julia's planned barbecue was getting underway. The driveway and street were lined with cars, and music blared from portable speakers set up on the deck. No one noticed our arrival at first, giving us a moment to observe the scene. My garden had been trampled, beer cans floated in the decorative pond Tom had built, and someone had attached a volleyball net to the support posts of the deck, posts that I knew weren't designed to handle such strain. Andrew's face darkened as he took in the scene. "This is completely unacceptable," he murmured. We walked up to the deck where Julia was holding court among her friends wearing a new-looking sundress I'd never seen before. When she spotted Andrew, her smile froze. "Honey, what a surprise, I thought you were interviewing today," she said, rushing over to kiss his cheek. "I rescheduled," Andrew replied coolly, "after my mother called me from a motel and told me she'd been thrown out of her own house." The music seemed to dim as people nearby sensed the tension. "That's not what happened," Julia began, lowering her voice. "Your mother misunderstood. We were just—" "Just what?" I interrupted, stepping forward. "Just telling me I'm an old parasite. Just moving my most precious belongings to a damp garage. Just lying to both me and my son about each other's whereabouts." Julia's parents appeared at her side. "This is a private family gathering," her father stated firmly. "We don't appreciate the interruption." Andrew's face reddened. "This is my mother's house. The only people interrupting anything are all of you who are here without permission." "Andrew," Julia hissed, "don't make a scene." "A scene?" Andrew's voice rose. "You told my mother, to her face, to leave her own property, called her a parasite, lied to me about speaking with her, and you're worried about a scene." By now the party had gone silent, all eyes on our confrontation. "Everyone needs to leave," Andrew announced to the crowd. "This gathering is over." "You can't be serious," Julia protested. "My friends drove hours to be here." "Then they can drive hours back home," Andrew replied firmly, "or find a hotel, but they can't stay here." Julia attempted to pull Andrew aside, whispering urgently, but he stood his ground. "No, Julia. I want to hear you explain to me in front of everyone why you thought it was acceptable to treat my mother this way." Put on the spot, Julia's composure cracked. "Fine. You want the truth? Your mother is constantly hovering, always watching my spending, judging my decisions. She acts like this house is some sacred shrine when it's just a building that could pay off our credit cards if you'd just agree to sell it." Gasps came from several guests who clearly hadn't realized they were participating in such family drama. "Sell it," Andrew repeated. "You've been planning to pressure me into selling my mother's house to cover the debts you've been racking up." I stepped forward, maintaining a dignified calm despite the chaos. "Julia, this house has never been about its monetary value. It represents our family history, Andrew's childhood, and the life I built with my husband. It was never yours to appropriate or plan to sell." Julia's mother interjected. "Well, maybe if you weren't so selfish with family resources." Andrew cut her off. "Enough Mom has been nothing but generous. She's worked hard her entire life, supported me through college, and never once made me feel guilty for pursuing my dreams. I won't stand here and listen to anyone speak to her disrespectfully, not even my wife's family." He turned to address the uncomfortable party guests. "I apologize for the inconvenience, but this gathering is over. Please collect your belongings and leave within the hour." Julia made one last desperate attempt. "Andrew, please, you're embarrassing me in front of everyone. I'm sorry if your mother's feelings were hurt, but she showed up unannounced during our vacation." "It's her house, Julia," Andrew stated simply. "She doesn't need an announcement to come to her own home." Julia's face crumpled in defeat as her friends awkwardly began gathering their things. Her father attempted to argue further, but Andrew remained unmoved. Within an hour, the cars began pulling away, leaving just Julia, her parents, Andrew, and me. "Your parents need to find other accommodations," Andrew told Julia firmly. "My mother will be staying in her bedroom." "This is ridiculous," Julia's mother huffed. "We paid for non-refundable beach activities for the next 5 days." "That's unfortunate," I replied calmly. "But perhaps this can be a learning opportunity about respecting other people's property and not making assumptions." As Julia's parents grudgingly packed their belongings, Julia made a tearful, if somewhat performative apology. "Sherry, I'm sorry if my words hurt you. I was just stressed about our financial situation and took it out on you." The apology lacked sincerity, focusing more on excusing her behavior than acknowledging the pain she'd caused. But I accepted it with grace, knowing that the real conversations were yet to come. After Julia's family departed, an uncomfortable silence settled over the beach house. The three of us, Andrew, Julia, and I, began the process of restoring order to the chaos left behind. As we worked, Andrew suggested Julia go for a walk to calm down while he and I finished cleaning. Once alone, my son enveloped me in a hug that reminded me of when he was a child seeking comfort after a fall. "Mom, I can't believe what you went through. I'm so sorry I wasn't there to protect you." "You're here now," I assured him. "But Andrew, we need to talk about what's really happening with you and Julia. Why didn't you tell me you lost your job?" We sat on the freshly cleared deck, the ocean breeze carrying away the lingering tension as Andrew opened up about the past several months. The tech company's sudden downsizing had left him without the generous salary he'd grown accustomed to. Julia had insisted they maintain appearances while he job hunted, which meant continuing to dine at expensive restaurants, keeping her regular salon appointments, and not canceling their country club membership. "I feel like I'm drowning," he admitted. "The severance package is almost gone. Julia doesn't want to hear about budgeting or cutting back. When I suggest she pick up more interior design clients, she says it would look desperate to her social circle." My heart ached for my son, who had always carried the weight of responsibilities so capably. "Andrew, you know I would have helped if you'd told me. I have savings." "That's exactly why I didn't tell you," he said ruefully. "You've done enough for me throughout my life. I'm supposed to be taking care of you now, not the other way around." As the afternoon progressed into evening, our conversation deepened. We reminisced about the summers spent in this very house, the lessons his father had taught him about resilience and integrity, and the values that had always defined our family. "Dad would be so disappointed in how I've handled this," Andrew said, looking out at the darkening ocean. "Your father would be proud of how you stood up today," I corrected gently. "It's easy to be principled when things are going well. The true test comes during difficulties." When Julia returned from her walk, she found Andrew and me preparing a simple dinner from the groceries left behind. The sight of us working together in comfortable familiarity seemed to heighten her sense of exclusion. Over the meal, Andrew calmly but firmly addressed the issues in their marriage: the financial deceptions, the disrespect toward me, and the need for honest communication going forward. "I think we need marriage counseling," he concluded, "and we need to create a realistic budget that acknowledges our current situation, not the lifestyle we wish we had." Julia's initial defensiveness gradually gave way to reluctant acceptance as Andrew remained steadfast. "Fine," she eventually agreed, "but I don't see why we have to involve a therapist in our private business." "Because we're not managing on our own," Andrew replied simply. And today showed me just how far we've strayed from the partnership I thought we were building. The next morning, I surprised both of them by announcing my own decision. "I'm going to stay at the beach house as planned, but I think you two should return to the city. Andrew needs to focus on his job search, and you both need space to work on your issues without me in the middle." "But Mom," Andrew protested, "I don't want to leave you here alone after everything that happened." I smiled, feeling stronger than I had in months. "I won't be alone. I called my old nursing colleague Susan, who lives 20 minutes away. We're going to reconnect, and I've decided to join the community center's book club that meets on Thursdays." The truth was, this ordeal had awakened me to how much I'd been defining myself through my relationship with Andrew. Without realizing it, I'd been putting my life on hold, waiting for visits and calls that were becoming increasingly infrequent. As Andrew and Julia packed to leave, I took my son aside for one final conversation. "This situation with Julia isn't just about her behavior," I told him. "It's also about boundaries I should have established long ago. I've been clinging too tightly because I was afraid of being truly alone after your father died." Andrew's eyes glistened. "You could never be a burden to me, Mom. Maybe not, I acknowledged. But I need to build my own life too, not just be waiting in the wings of yours. After they departed, I stood on the deck watching the waves crash against the shore, feeling a curious mixture of sadness and liberation. The beach house seemed peaceful again, restored to its rightful purpose as a haven rather than a battlefield. In the weeks that followed, I flourished in ways I hadn't anticipated. Susan introduced me to her circle of friends. Other retired professionals who hiked coastal trails, volunteered at the local Marine Life Center, and hosted dinner parties where conversations ranged from books to politics to travel plans. I discovered a talent for watercolor painting during a community class, and soon had several seascapes decorating the beach house walls. I started swimming daily, feeling my body grow stronger with each passing week. When Andrew called with updates, our conversations felt different, more balanced, with him sharing honest accounts of the marriage counseling and job interviews, and me contributing stories of my new activities and friends. 3 months later, Andrew secured a new position, not as prestigious as his former job, but with a company whose values aligned better with his own. He and Julia had downsized to a smaller apartment and were slowly working through their issues with a therapist's guidance. During their first visit back to the beach house, I noticed subtle changes. Julia was more subdued, less concerned with appearances. She made a genuine effort to connect with me, asking about my painting, and actually listening to the response. One evening, as we sat on the deck watching the sunset, Julia approached me alone. "I want to apologize properly," she said, sitting beside me. "Not the rushed, insincere apology from before. What I said to you was cruel and untrue. You're not a parasite. You've given Andrew a foundation of love that made him the man I fell in love with. I was jealous of your bond and terrified about our finances. But that's no excuse for how I treated you." The apology wasn't perfect, but I could sense the effort behind it. "Thank you, Julia," I replied. "I accept your apology, and I recognize that I haven't always been easy to deal with either. I'm learning to give you both the space to be your own family unit." Our relationship remains a work in progress. There are still awkward moments and occasional tensions, but the foundation has shifted toward mutual respect and clearer boundaries. As for me, I've discovered that the most unexpected outcome of being thrown out of my own house was finding myself again. The painful experience forced me to recognize how I'd been living in the shadows of my past and my son's future, neglecting my own present. Today, the beach house remains in my name, but it feels different now, not just as a repository of memories, but as the setting for new chapters I'm writing in my life. I host my own friends for dinner, proudly displaying my increasingly competent watercolors. I've joined a senior swimming group that meets at dawn to brave the ocean waves together. Sometimes when I'm sitting on the deck with a cup of tea watching the pelicans dive for fish in the early morning light, I think about how being forced out of what I thought was my only safe space led me to create something even more precious. A life that's fully mine, built on my own terms, filled with connections that extend beyond just my son. Perhaps that's the most important lesson in all of this. Sometimes being pushed out of what we consider home is the first step to finding ourselves and building a new home, not just with walls and a roof, but with respect, love, and the dignity we deserve. Have you ever experienced a situation where someone made you feel unwelcome in your own space? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more of my journey. Don't forget to share with someone who might need to remember their own worth today. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to rediscover your strength and independence.